shoes. A very important episode to the Seinfeld series. As I've said in previous videos, this episode, The Shoes, this is the first episode that actually aired on Thursday nights at 9:30 following Cheers. It was the beginning of the audition for Cheers' spot, the 9 o'clock spot on Thursday nights. That was the premiere spot for television. And this was the first episode that aired after Cheers. And let me tell you, it was a pretty good one. It was originally supposed to be called The Script, but then it got changed to The Shoes. We kind of for a while took a little bit of a break from the whole NBC storyline. It was mentioned here and there that that Jerry and George were working on a pilot for NBC. And as we had discovered back in the Virgin episode, the idea for the pilot that they went with in the end that NBC thought was hilarious was the idea for the Jerry show that the pilot would be about Jerry gets in a car accident and the guy who hits him ends up being it was his fault, but he had no insurance, and he's been forced to become Jerry's butler, which is the idea they're going with. So in the opening scene, they're in the apartment working on the script, writing it as they got just a few hours before they have to present the first draft of the script to Dalrymple. And then, of course, they noticed that they hadn't wrote the Elaine character in there yet. But they weren't able to get her in there. And in the first draft of the script, she wasn't in it. Now, the reason why, of course, they did that, because, like I've said at the beginning of this season, this is a story arc of the entire season of Jerry and George writing a pilot for NBC with a similar story about how Jerry and Larry David were starting out writing this actual show as well. And the idea of the storyline of them not knowing how to write Elaine in the pilot because they didn't know how to write for a woman is supposed to be a replacement story for how originally, when the original Seinfeld Chronicles was written, there wasn't really a female character in there besides, of course, Claire, that waitress. This is kind of that replacement story of you gotta have a woman involved as one of the main characters, pretty much. So, of course, that got fixed eventually later. Kramer also stops by, and he sees how he saw an old girlfriend of Jerry's, Gail Cunningham. A girl that Jerry had apparently gone on 3 dates with, and all 3 dates she refused to kiss him goodnight. And Kramer said that he had snubbed her. And of course, Gail did not take that too lightly. But George, though, was going to get ready to go see his psychiatrist, Dana Foley, and he was going to show her the script. So he went to see her, and she says he's made progress with his emotions and whatnot. And as he's getting ready to leave, he asks her, "Did you read the script at all?" And she said she did, and she thought it was good, but she didn't think it was funny, which George takes a lot of offense to it. And then Dana tells him that, if you're going to be in, the writing in this field, you got to, be able to take constructive criticism. And George just flips off the handle and goes back to Jerry's apartment, saying that, she completely shattered his confidence. Before that, though, while George was at was seeing Dana, Jerry was eating lunch with Elaine at Monk's, where, first off, that's where Elaine was upset because she didn't like the script because the Elaine character was not in it, and then that's when Jerry said he didn't know how to write for a woman. So, meantime, Gail Cunningham comes in, and she confronts Jerry and says, "What's going on with your friend Kramer? Why he snubbed me," and goes off on that. Then she looks over and she notices Elaine's shoes, which she asks where'd you get them from, and she said Botticelli's. But then when she left, Elaine started complaining that she's talking about my shoes. Why is she talking about my shoes? This is another, kind of petty thing that Elaine was complaining about. How dare you talk about my shoes? But it's Everybody else is like, Elaine, what's the big deal? Um, so she starts off on that tantrum. But then back to the apartment, anyways. Whenever George was talking about how Dana insulted the script and ruined his confidence. Kramer then though comes back in, and he mentions how he saw Gail again, and she started complaining about snubbing. So they started talking, and before they parted ways, Kramer planted a kiss on her, which Jerry's like, "Now, why would you do that?" And then he goes, there goes that. But then he also tells Elaine that she also was talking about her Botticelli shoes. And again, Elaine just flips out. I'm going to go down and confront her about this. So she goes down to Pfeiffer's, the place where Gail is a chef at, and walks into the kitchen and complains to Gail. Now, in the midst of all this, also, Elaine was running like a cold or some sort of sickness. She had been coughing a couple times, and while she was arguing with Gail about her talking about her shoes, Elaine sneezed on a dish of pasta primavera. Who did that dish of pasta primavera get taken to? None other than NBC's Russell Dalrymple. Yep, the president of NBC, who Jerry and George were getting ready to have a meeting with to talk about the first draft of the script for the pilot. And of course, it didn't go well for him because they then go to shots of the meeting. And the meeting ended up having to take place at Russell's apartment, the same place where George had went to when he was trying to get to negotiate more money with Dalrymple back in the Watch episode. And of course, he says he wasn't feeling well. His stomach, something with the pasta primavera. You see, and ate at Pfeiffer's. Then George starts telling some story about Bouchard's and about some dish coming from the toilet or something, or it tastes like something from the toilet or whatnot. But anyways, they sit down and they start talking. Dalrymple also warns them that lets them know that, hey, my 15-year-old daughter is going to be stopping by soon, also coming for a visit. She lives with her mother, which shows there, of course, that Russell is divorced. We also knew that because when George came by his apartment during the Watch episode, he was having a dinner date. So Dalrymple starts talking about the script. He says he's read it 3 times, but every time he's read it, he starts swallowing, acting a little funny. He goes, "Excuse me." He runs into the bathroom and shuts the door. And they're asking, like, what did you like it? Did the butler need more of this? Did that have to happen? Or what was it? And then he's like, "Do you think you liked it?" And all of a sudden we hear Dalrymple's in there throwing up. Obviously he got sick from that pasta primavera. And then he came out and apologized, saying it just like hit him basically. He sits down, he tries to discuss the script again, the same lines. He books it back again to the bathroom, doesn't even shut the door, and he probably like 3, 4, 5 times just started throwing up. And then he's like, "Oh my god, oh my god." And then Jerry's like, "Maybe we should leave. The guy's coughed up a lung in there." And then Dalrymple's daughter, Molly, comes in. And, obviously she hears her dad throwing up in the bathroom. And obviously she finds out that her dad just has a stomach thing. And then Dalrymple peeks out of the bathroom and says, "I'm sorry about this. He says, we're going to have to do this another time." He goes, "Just take your number and I'll give you a call." I was like, okay. So as, they're getting preparing to leave, well, George is picking up. Jerry then pokes George with his elbow. George looks over and notices that Molly is leaning over. And he starts staring at her cleavage. And George doesn't stop, though. This is the famous line of, like, "It's like the sun, you don't stare at it for too long." But as George was staring at it for a little too long, Dalrymple comes out of the corner, gets in his ear and goes, "You get a good look, Costanza." And then they think they left a bad impression. They're both worried that, something may have happened. So obviously they're worried about that. Then Kramer stops by with Gail. Gail mentions the fact that, Elaine barged in on her in her kitchen the other day, and then she also said something about that. She also may have sneezed on someone's pasta primavera. Someone could have gotten sick over that, which they put two and two together, realized that Elaine was the one who sneezed on Dalrymple's pasta primavera. And I forgot to mention that before, but I think back in the pitch I talked about how the one thing that cracks me up about Dalrymple is Bob Balaban, who plays him, looks a lot like an old basketball coach of mine that I didn't like back in middle school. I did not like him. He was a jerk, and just wasn't a good coach. He was not a fair coach. I wouldn't say fair, but he basically just didn't know how to coach a team. Basically, he was just not a good coach. He also didn't even give you a chance to get better at all whatsoever. But anyways, Bob Balaban looks a lot like my old basketball coach. And my parents, and it was around the time I had that coach, the first time I had heard about Dalrymple. And my dad was like, yeah, there's a character on this episode of Seinfeld who looks like your basketball coach. I don't want to say his name out of respect. And he got sick because he ate pasta primavera that Elaine sneezed on. And I'm like, well, if that was my coach, my for real coach, that he got what he deserved. But with Dalrymple, no, Dalrymple's a good guy. I like Dalrymple. But of course, Jerry and George were worrying. And of course, they put two together and realized that it was Elaine who sneezed on the pasta primavera. Which, if she would never sneezed on the pasta primavera, they would have never gone to his apartment instead of the office, and they would have never seen Dalrymple's daughter. Well, then they get a call from Stu from NBC, who's supposed to be filling for Rick Ludwin, and he calls and tells them that Dalrymple canceled the pilot, which obviously is because of George's immaturity. So they again start arguing again, and the whole thing about he poked me, and then it's like the sun, you don't stay there for too long. So then Elaine was over, and they were blaming this on Elaine, saying this and that. So then they're trying to come up with another plan, and again Elaine's still just flipping out about Gail Cunningham talking about how she had a reason to go into that kitchen because she was just so upset about Gail talking about her shoes, which once again they're continuing to ask, what's the big deal? She's talking about your shoes. So then they're trying to think, we got to think of something like but they're also mentioning how they got to prove to Dalrymple also that would he not get a look at someone who's wearing a low-cut dress also? So they come up with this idea. They realize that he goes to Pfeiffer's a lot, and of course, since they know Gail, they told Kramer to ask Gail to keep an eye out. And the next time that Dalrymple comes to Pfeiffer's, give him a call, let him know. And he gives her a call. She said she'll do it, but she wants the shoes. She wants Elaine's Botticelli shoes. In which Elaine flips out again, but of course, they talk her into it. And then Dalrymple shows up, and then Gail calls them and says, yeah, he's here. Oh, and just one more thing. Bring the shoes. So they bring the shoes, and they act like they were just there out of coincidence, but of course they obviously were not. But they were trying, but Dalrymple basically was just trying to push them away. In the meantime, Elaine was walking around wearing a very low-cut dress, but she was not getting Dalrymple's attention. So finally, she borrows his ketchup bottle. And then she tried to make conversation with him about ketchup. And then she asks him if he has a ketchup secret. And then he's like, no, but looks up and he notices Elaine, and his face just lights up. And basically it was kind of like, okay, I get the message now. So the pilot was then back on, and Elaine was going to be going out with a date with him in a couple nights. I guess Elaine then mentions how well, first they were saying, now when you go out with Russell, if you could just put a good word about the script. And then Elaine says, by the way, and she pulls out the script and made a couple suggestions that she would mention to Russell, see if it was a good idea. I think she even mentioned something about how the Elaine character comes in wearing a low-cut dress, and the butler was distracted by her when doing the work or something like that. But a couple other things she kind of said about it. Georgian asks, where's he taking you to? And she goes, Bouchard's on 53rd. And then George starts coughing because he told that story earlier about that one piece of food. They're comparing it to eating it from a toilet or something like that. And then Jerry goes, I think what he's saying is get the bouillabaisse, and he's like still coughing on his drink, which they did like 5 or how many takes of that because they kept laughing at that. But that's how the episode ends, and that's the shoes. Remember, bring the shoes. Like I said, good episode, a very good episode for the Thursday night debut at 9:30 following Cheers. As of course it would go on to beat Cheers in the ratings, and again it would win Cheers' 9 o'clock time slot on Thursday nights the following season for season 5. Again, it's a great episode, and that's actually the last episode on disc 3. Again, definitely probably my favorite disc to pull out in the whole series. Some of my favorites, including my favorite episode, The Airport. Season 5 that has a couple episodes also is up there as one of my favorites also when we get there. But yeah, we're in the home stretch, including the 2-part finale. We have 7 episodes left in season 4. And I'm intrigued to talk about most of the ones on the next disc. We have a couple ones good. Again, the pilot. We got the smelly car, the implants. Oh, that one's good too. That has another good ending, just like the ending to the Cheever letters when Elaine says the thing about the panties that her mother laid out for her. We got that. We have, and the implants has a good ending as well. We'll also meet Frank Costanza for the first time as well in the handicap spot. So, couple good episodes coming up in the end season 4. So I'm looking forward to definitely talking about those. But guys, what are your thoughts on Pasta Primavera, The Shoes, Dalrymple and Elaine? George not taking the criticism from his psychiatrist slightly. What are your thoughts, guys, on The Shoes? Leave your thoughts down in the comments section below. Be sure, as always, to slap a like on the video. Subscribe for more content on my channel. Follow me on Twitter at TheManAirBryan3. And also remember, it's just like the sun. You don't stare at it for too long. So until then, guys, I'm checking out. I'll see you guys all later. Have a good night. Have a good start to your week. Peace out, everybody.